Hey, Facebook friends, Marianne here. I wanted to reach out to you because I don't know about you, but I've been seeing a lot of rhetoric all over Facebook and all over Instagram and all over the news that is just promoting, well, frankly, a lot of abject hate. And it's really, really breaking my heart because I'm kind of a mutt. I'm made up of DNA from all over the place. Even with DNA that says 15% unidentifiable. Any of you who've ever done that 23andMe knows what I'm talking about. I get reminded every month, hey, 15% of you is unidentifiable. So I guess some ancestor got it on with an alien. But joking aside, when I look at my life, I'm obviously, when you see this and this melanin, I'm obviously mostly Native American. I've got, some Iberian in me, so some Conquistador probably raped somebody a long time ago. I've got some Western African, I've got some Southeastern Asian, I've actually gotten some Siberian, I've gotten some Northern African, I've gotten a whole lot of different things in me. And I was adopted by a mostly white family. So, when I put all this together, I've been blessed to meet so many different people who have helped shape my life in ways that I can't even begin to count the value of, I've been seeing the rhetoric and I get it. I get why people are angry, but I also worry, and this is the organizational psychologist part of me, I worry about how people are being used, how people are being manipulated. And some of it is genuine. Some of it is coming from genuine places of pain, and I understand that. Earlier today, Devontae, if you're out there, love you, brother. Love you so much, and I've got your back. You've had mine for a long time too. I think the world of you. And, I think you are one of the rising stars in our city. You care deeply about the people, and you've always advocated for what is right and social justice. And I can feel the pain of what I've been seeing about someone who is not getting tried by their peers because they don't have one black person on the jury. I can understand the pain of that. At the same time, I was in a situation years ago where my Aunt Dorothy Booth was murdered by a woman, and the people who do the professional cleaning after a body is killed were not available. And so after the body was moved, my mom and I had to clean up that house so that her children didn't have to go in there. And I know what it feels like to use a sponge and cloths and to clean up the blood of somebody that you love who fought for their life. And I understand that pain. So it probably surprises a lot of people that I'm not opposed to the death penalty. In that case, the murderer was caught using the bloody knife that she killed my aunt with to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for her child. So I actually think he was probably much better off without a mother that would be doing that. So the reason why I share something not deeply personal is because things aren't cut and dry. If you've ever had someone that was murdered, then you had to clean up their blood. It's not an easy thing to dismiss when a murder has taken place. On the other hand, we are living in such convoluted times when people are at each other's throats, and we need more than ever to have empathy. We need more than ever the ability to step outside ourselves and say, what would we want if we were put on trial? We would want to see people that look like ourselves, people who come from the same economic brackets, people who share some of the same religious beliefs, people who share some of the same cultural beliefs. And if we're not having some of those demographics at a trial, then it is not a trial by our peers. And so I can understand why activists are out there. And I worry deeply because I see the hate that this is creating between, the African American community and the white community. And I see the statements that are coming out, and people are saying, oh, white people this. And yet, I know for a fact that my family, who is mostly white, risked their lives. I'm talking about going back to the 1920s. Actually, I can go all the way back to my grandmother, Margaret Philip Thompson. Her family had a plantation, and they operated an underground railroad that my cousin Paul Philip told me about, that was basically helping African Americans escape into Mexico. and they risked their lives for that. My grandfather risked his life in fighting for desegregation during the 20s and 30s and the 40s and 50s, and had, Klan members burning crosses in their yards and threatening them. I saw what that was like, in terms of my family living up to that, and what my dad continued to fight for, and how people continue to, say that they would kill him or kill me, and he still do what was right. Because it was, he said, this is how we stand up for our nation. And the reason I share that is because those are white people that stood up for African Americans. Right now, my company, Thompson-Frenk Inc., is publishing Reverend Peter Johnson's autobiography. And without giving away any of the story, I can tell you that Ray Nasher hid him, in his cabana when the Ku Klux Klan was trying to find him. And so the things that I'm just sharing with you here are things that are part of our history in the South. It's not as, good versus evil, everyone of one demographic versus another demographic defines who is good and who is evil. And unless we can step outside ourselves and recognize that history, we are going to let ourselves be torn apart. We are going to let ourselves be isolated. And when we are isolated, we're going to allow that anger, that festering. And I'm not saying that anger doesn't already have a place. It does. Believe me, I understand what it feels like to be told, hey, we can solve this problem with all the immigrants by pushing you up against the wall and shooting you in the head. Problem solved. I've been told that to my face. I get that. I get the pain. I've had people, when I was in my 20s, I had a cop hold a gun in my head and they were, nervous wreck this far from my head. And it was because, I was brown-skinned and they were, the cop was nervous. I'd been told to dress up like a pirate. And so I had a little blade and, I guess that was enough to make this cop nervous and call it in. And next thing I knew, I was surrounded by cops that all had guns because they didn't know why she had a gun. They just knew they needed to back her up. And it was a white professor that came between me and her very slowly and said, I asked you to dress like a pirate. And that's probably a good reason as to why I'm not dead, why I wasn't shot that day. So I know what racism feels like and how it stems from fear. I've seen it in the face many, many times. And, I don't belittle it. But what I can tell you right now, the things I'm hearing, people are saying, oh, the white people who stood up for Black Lives Matter, where are they now? Or all white people this. And then I saw that huge gathering that happened up in Plano, and it was all these people saying that they're going to be fighting against the redneck people and blah, 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 and celebrating Asians. And I saw that they drew white people. And it was despicable. It was as despicable as what I see archetypes of African Americans or Mexican Americans or Native Americans. And when we start making caricatures of ourselves in basis of race, and we start siloing each other to be individually off here, and we start saying, your people this, my people this, we're doing the work for the people that want to tear us apart. And when anything has ever been achieved, it is when we work together. I can't emphasize that enough. And I'm saying this as someone who has donated to Black Lives Matter, who's donated to the Poor People's Campaign, who's donated to what Devontae is doing too. Commissary is very necessary. I will continue to stay with you. I'm saying this as somebody who's supported financially and time people with Juan Mancias, the Kamakuto Carrizo tribe of Texas, with IAA, Indigenous Institute of Americas, with the Native American Holocaust Museum down in Houston. I've supported that. I've supported the Asian Cultural Center. I've supported the Japanese. I can go on down the list. LGBT, whatever, you name it. I have supported just about every single demographic in the city of Dallas. And it's because I'm a human being. It's because I don't have to look like you. It's because I don't have to believe like you. It's because unless I, as a brown-skinned, bisexual female, can look across and see you as a white, blue-eyed, straight male and say, what you're dealing with matters, unless I can look out and see an African American straight male and say, what I see you and you matter. What you're feeling, what you're dealing with matters. I don't have to live it. I don't have to be struggling with the same things that you're struggling with to care. But I do owe it to all of the people in the United States. I do owe it to my fellow man. I do owe it to my fellow citizens to say, your existence is enough for me to frankly give a damn. You know, I was deeply disturbed by somebody, not too long ago who was saying, in the area that I live in, they're saying, why should we pay into the public, education system? I send my kids over to private schools, and I'm thinking, you know what, because we happen to live in an area where you have people within a radius, and not many places in Texas have this, where people within a radius of the same radius have every kind of economic bracket. And those of us that have more means, we pay our taxes. I will never have children. I don't plan on having children. And by golly, I am grateful to be able to put my money toward the taxes, because I want to know that the people next door or people a few blocks away who could otherwise not get a quality education are getting that, because those children are my responsibility. And if I did have children and I did send them to some private school, guess what? I would still care that those children who are not my children have access to the best education possible. I don't have to be them to care. And that's what I feel like we're missing in the United States. And I'm just seeing this again and again and again. I'm seeing so much hatred from each of us to each other. And I'm recognizing they're dividing us. They are dividing us. They are trying to say, this is your problem, that's my problem. But here's the facts. If you are a white, middle-class American who maybe you work a decent paying job and you're someone that can't ever take a vacation, to California, but you can afford to maybe drive your family to the next state over to visit family and make the most of your vacation, and you're really, but you've never really made it further and don't know how to make it further, guess what? MAGA is not your friend. They're not doing anything that's going to help you financially. They're not. And I'm seeing all this, and I'm like, what's powerful, how they got MAGA? They looked at a bunch of people that were white, and they were struggling, and no one saw them, and believe me, I get it. We have a program within the Mimsy Institute that was called, Scott of a Box program. It was designed to try and help people in third world situations, and that could be Native American reservations, that could be third world countries. And I got a phone call from people in the Appalachians going, oh my God, when you design this, bring this here, because they don't care. I was going up to the White House the next week, and I talked to 3 different departments, and I asked them each, do you care about Appalachians? Oh, that's too much work, we can't even reach out there. That was during the Obama administration. People had big hearts, but they didn't want to, they didn't know how to even begin, so they're like, that's too big a problem. And I know that it was a mostly white area out there. And so when suddenly you had people saying, I see you, I hear you, you matter, it was the first time a lot of these white people were hearing that. And that is the power. That is why they can, touch the bigotry that's being held. It's so easy to grab onto people's bigotry and say, it's that person's fault. And that way you don't have to offer a solution. And that's what attracted them to MAGA. And that's why they are also trying to attract people of different demographics, and why they succeeded last time. They reached out to the same kind of economic brackets and say, are you Hispanic and you work hard? Don't you hate all those immigrants that are coming over? They're just making your life hell. Aren't you black? Well, they're just making your life hell. They're taking away black jobs. And no one's paying attention to the fact that Trump recently came out on the news and said, oh, we're going to be creating black jobs, and he was referring to all of these physical labor jobs, all of these sweatshop jobs. I mean, it was demeaning, especially when you consider the #1 demographic in the United States getting doctorates are African American women. The #2 demographic are women. They're terrified of the change. And if we really want to try and hold our country together, those of us who do not fit the ideal demographic of extremely wealthy, of no melanin in the skin, of being straight and being male and being their preferred type of Protestant, because make note that Catholics didn't make their preferred list for the military, and Mormons didn't make their preferred list for the new list that they have of federal government preferred religions or whatever the crap that is. And if you think that your religion is on that list, you're just one hop, skip, and jump away from some politician tossing you out. Right now is the time that all of us who don't look perfect in the eyes of that demographic need to be looking at each other and saying, we have to work together. And yeah, I do mean the most conservative Muslim, guess what? You have a lot in common with the crazy, outlandish drag queen right now, because neither of you fit the status quo. And that means that both of you are fighting for your human rights. All of us are fighting for our civil rights. And if we allow ourselves to be torn apart like this, we allow ourselves to be demonized in the eyes of each other, and we allow individual actors to come out and say, hate that group, all of them are this, hate this group, all of them are that, all of your problems are due to this group or that group. We are not going to be able to save our democracy. We are not going to be able to hold on to our freedoms. And it's terrifying. And maybe, they talk about the proverbial frog in a pot of water, how you very slowly, you turn the heat up and people don't notice. And, because I'm blessed to travel in the world, I was speaking here in Portugal and I was taking a break before I have to go and do more work-related stuff in London. And, when you step out of the boiling pot that's been slowly, you get a big wake-up call. I walk around here hand in hand with my husband and no one bats an eyelash that we are interracially married. And I think back to, when I was at CPAC and they were actually talking about trying to make, interracial marriage illegal. I mean, hello. This is the crazy stuff that's going on in our country. I'm walking around and I found out if someone wanted to become a citizen here in Portugal, you know what they're required to do? They're required to swear that they will respect the equality of all religions in the eyes of the law. If you are unwilling to swear to that, you don't get to become a citizen. And they say they're doing that to prevent fascism because they have a memory of what had happened in the past. So, why do we have to go through and repeat the same mistakes that we have seen other countries survive? Barely. Here in Portugal, Franco in Spain, Hitler in Germany. We've seen what other countries have done. We've seen what other countries have, failed at. And we are not paying attention. Instead, we're allowing individual actors to call all of us out and say, start blaming people, start saying it's their fault, his fault, their fault. They don't look like me. They're not in the same tax bracket as I am. Well, you know what? All of you that are posting all this stuff, how many friends out there who have come to me and asked me to donate to you? And you're saying, eat the rich, I hate the rich. You know what? I was born in abject poverty on the streets of Mexico. I did not choose to be in this situation. It is a privilege to have the finances that were given to me, which came on the backs of generations of blood, sweat, and tears. And all I can do is use that dollar represents their blood, sweat, and tears. All I can do is honor that blood, sweat, and tears by trying to help as many of you as possible. And there are people like me doing that, and I know it because I just worked with many of them. And now they're helping me to feed people. They're helping me to come out there and try and balance U.S. aid off and other initiatives that our government is really hurting around the world. There are about 500,000 people are estimated to have died because we ended USA aid. And that does not include all the farmers whose grain and produce were bought to help with USA aid. You know what happened when we stopped doing that? They didn't get any money. So they're struggling. And you know what also happened? We lost what's called soft power, our influence of helping others. And other countries are stepping in, and America is losing our influence. We're losing our ability and our capacity to have other countries want to collaborate with us. We will not survive in a world that is incredibly more interconnected than ever before if we do it alone. And they are trying to isolate us again and again and again. Isolate our economy from the rest of the world, unless you're in the top 1%. I have gotten a hobnob with a number of billionaires. The people at the top, they are still working collaboratively across the world. And if you want to survive in the evolving nature of the economy of the world, you have to be part of it. And that's not a simple, easy thing to ignore. That's the reality that we've all inherited. And I'm worried. I'm worried that we're allowing our country to become isolated, and we're allowing ourselves, our individual demographics within our country, to become isolated. Each of us matters, and I see you, I hear you, and you matter, regardless. If you are a drag queen, if you are an imam, if you are a rabbi, if you are a really progressive rabbi, or if you're a Hasidic rabbi. I have all sorts of friends of you. I have different, I have the imams, one type of Muslim. I have people who, are Ismaili from another type of Muslim community. I have people that are Wiccan. I have people that are Native American. I have people that are Igbo. I have people that are Yoruba. I can go on down the list. I know a bunch of Native Americans that, from the United States, Native Americans from Canada, and the Americans from Mexico. Guess what? We are all in this together. And if we are not working together, if we are not listening together, if we are not approaching with empathy and compassion together, we will lose our democracy. And the hatred that we are seeing come across the screen is becoming too casualized. We cannot allow this hate to become the norm. It is not okay to say all black people this, all white people that, all Jewish people this, all Catholic people this. It is not okay for us to do that, because if we make that normal, if we make that casual, then we have divided ourselves, and that was half of it. They say divide and conquer. Why do we want to make this easier for other people? Why do we want to make this easier for the opportunists that are trying to push MAGA forward, which, yes, is a fascist regime? They are trying to destroy our democracy. And we are doing half the work for them if we are saying that we hate each other when we are not the exact same. And if we truly, truly expect to hold on to the freedoms that we all inherited, which were so hard won by many of the elders that still live among us. Our executive director, Philip Collins of the Menacing Institute, I remember walking through the Martin Luther King Museum, Memphis, Tennessee. We're walking by, we see a video, and then I see him rubbing his hand, and I look up at the video, and they had a video of someone putting a cigarette out on his hand, and he's rubbing me, showing me the scar. He's alive. He is our executive director. This is what I mean. People who suffered risked everything so that you and I can have our rights. If you're a woman, the fact that you can own property and have a bank account is because of other people. If you're Hispanic, the fact that you can get a degree is because of other people. And guess what? One of the people was my white, blue-eyed, blonde father, who went out and told, and I didn't even know this until I was being interviewed by people at a Mexican-American newspaper down in Austin. I was speaking at the Mexican Art Museum. And someone came up to me and said, I knew your father. He said, how did you know him? He said, because I was part of the contingent of students that weren't allowing Hispanics and brown people to go and pursue a master's degree or a doctorate. And he would come out and sneak out of the chancellor's meetings and say, hey, protest so-and-so at this time, at this place. He was our mole. My dad never bragged about that to me. And there's so many people whose names we will never know who did that kind of stuff so that we can pursue our education. There's so many people who do that for every single demographic. My friend Dr. Philip Shinoda, he's still alive. You know what he endured? His family had money, had means out in California. They were ripped away from their house. The government confiscated all that they owned, and they were sent up to Idaho, and they escaped by hiding under a bunch of potatoes until they got a potato truck that got them into Texas and had to restart their whole lives. So when he's seeing these internment camps, he's saying, I've seen this before. This is stuff that our elders around us tell us they've seen, they fought against, so that we would not have to. And yet we're seeing this happen again. When I was in my 20s, one of the most common things I would tell people is, don't be the older generation that says, there's a hole in the boat. We helped make that hole in the boat. I'm doing my bit by educating you to let you know there's a hole in the boat. Good luck, and jump out of the boat and leave it to them. Right now, all of us who are in a position of power, of any sort, and power comes in many different forms. You may have, a huge social media following. You may have an organization. You may just have a bunch of friends. You may be a CEO. You may be an activist. Whatever you are, you have power. Use that power to remind people of their common humanity. Because that's what's going to make us lose our democracy. We are going to lose our freedoms if we do not stand up for the people who are completely different than ourselves. And when we see the kind of hatred that is coming out at us from every direction, people making caricatures of different races, encouraging their own race to blame and demonize and haggle. And when we don't stand up for those people, and yes, I admit, if someone murdered somebody, guess what? It's painful. Like I said, I had to clean up the blood of my aunt who was murdered. And I am still grateful that she had people of her demographic on that jury because it meant she had a fair trial. And the day that we don't want the worst among us to have a fair trial, we lose our democracy. And I understand the feelings are high. I understand when our African American friends say that it's just a lynch mob when they don't see a single black person on that jury. That is a travesty of justice. I understand when white people are upset of how they're caricaturized by someone out there who's saying, we're going to celebrate the Asian community, but he puts out all these caricatures. I understand when people are blaming people of different religions or how the Mormons are feeling being knocked off the preferred list of religions. But the sad thing is that none of us should have to wait until we're the ones who are aimed at, until we're the ones who are isolated, until we're the ones who are demonized. We have to recognize our common humanity and stand up for each other, or we will lose everything past generations fought, died, bled, and sacrificed for. And there is a better way. I'm seeing it in other countries, and they love us. I want you to know that. When I'm over here, I hear American music. I hear people talk about the stories of what we used to be, and there's genuine heartbreak about seeing the fascism that is rising in our country. But the more people argue over a stupid arch in Washington, D.C., the more people argue over, sports arenas, the more people focus on these things, the easier it is for laws to be passed that threaten all of us. And that's the thing people keep forgetting. What happens to another demographic happens to ourselves. I'm not saying you have to go buddy-buddy with somebody. If you are an extremely conservative Southern Baptist, an extremely conservative Muslim, and a flaming progressive drag queen, and a flaming progressive brown black woman, it doesn't mean we have to be buddy-buddy. But it does mean we have to recognize the minute one of our civil rights and one of our human rights are threatened, all of ours are threatened. Don't let them divide and conquer by doing half the job for them. Don't let them divide us more than we are. Now, for those of you that are quick to say, well, we've always been divided, I challenge you. If you are black and you're saying, all Hispanics hate me, all white people don't, well, I challenge you. Many of you have asked me to write a donation or ask Joshua to help out. And we have. I want you to look at my face and think of my husband's face and remember, not all have been disloyal, not all have ignored. Many of us have marched and put our actions and our money and our energy where our words are. And if you're someone who is white, put your actions and your energy where your words are, because that will say more than anything you put on Facebook. And I know it's painful when you're demonized because people say, oh yeah, those Black Lives Matter, white people. Well, guess what? I had a really good friend of mine, Cook Buchanan. He used to be the executive director of Mimnesine a long time ago. He was one of the co-founders. And when I worked with Reverend William Barber and I wanted to help fund the beginning of the Poor People's Campaign in Texas, he said we needed somebody who would be key to helping set it up. And it was Cook Buchanan, who was pure, straight up Scottish. And he did all the training. He went over to Memphis. He did everything to set it up. And you can ask the Dallas chapter of the Poor People's Campaign, and they will tell you it was this white man that began it. And I was talking to his wife, and she was telling me that he came back home and he cried because he said what he was exposed to The Ku Klux Klan was so strong up there in Memphis that they made him go to places, and it felt like he'd gone back into the 1950s. He got spat on, he got shoved, he got screamed at by other white people who said you're self-hating, because he was training to be with the Poor People's Campaign with Reverend William Barber. And he stuck with it until the day he died. There are people who are risking it. A lot of people forget the grassy knoll was where they lynched white people who stood up in Dallas against segregation. That's why that was the place Kennedy was assassinated, because it had that symbolism. There are people who have sacrificed, and as I mentioned before, Reverend Peter Johnson will tell you about how Ray Nasher hid him in the cabana of his house so that the Ku Klux Klan couldn't find him. There are stories about us working together. And that was the only way that those evil forces were defeated in the past. And some of these forces are the same people, same families, same entities, same corporations. And I am risking myself by saying this out here. But I encourage you, remember who your allies are. The Wynn family stood up historically again and again and again. Generation after generation after generation, they fought the Ku Klux Klan. My family, the Thompson family, stood up from the Philp family having that Underground Railroad into Mexico, to my grandfather, to my father, and what they're doing today. We have allies in each other. Please remember that. Please remember that we do half the job of those that want to destroy our democracy if we do the dividing ourselves. We must work together. We must come together. We cannot forget the value of that solidarity. We do not have to like each other. We do not have to hang out with each other to be able to understand that our civil rights and human rights and our potential for maintaining American democracy depends on each other having civil rights and human rights. Because we need to pay very close attention to what's happening. Because while all this other stuff is loud, but then this past month, the state of Texas gave police officers the right to just take anybody and throw them into one of those concentration camps. You can be a citizen. It is now legal for them to do that. I personally worked with people, and I will not threaten any of them by saying the facts that I know, that there was somebody who helped get Klan members into the Dallas police force. And there are other people that were working to try and get them out. I don't know how far along that went. But I can tell you people of all races were involved in trying to combat that. So the fact that there still may be some there and have just been given that kind of power in the state of Texas is terrifying. When my cousin Paul Philp was responsible for doing African American and Hispanic, history, and history books to get published in the state of Texas, because many people don't realize they get published in either California or Texas. And he was given responsibility for that. He said that there are people who were very progressive who hated him for saying that there's an economic reason for slavery. And there are people who are very conservative who hated him for saying that there was a racist basis for who they decided to enslave. He wasn't interested in making anyone happy. He was interested in truth. And he said if he didn't acknowledge there's an economic basis, it would not prevent us from one day doing and repeating the history again, which is essentially what's happening now. Because if you look at any of these concentration camps, they are being forced to work at most for $1 a day. And when they're not working, they're packed in so tightly they can't sit down. You have mothers who are being given formula and then being given dirty, rancid water. And many of these mothers were not pregnant when they went in, but they've been raped by ICE officers. This is the reality of what is happening in our country. This is how scary it is. And the fact that this is now a threat to anyone. I know someone right now who is a multimillionaire who was basically taken to Alligator Alcatraz and is still being held by ICE. Your money won't get you out. So don't think your tax bracket is going to save you. The only thing that will save you is recognizing our common humanity and the codependence of our civil rights and human rights on each other's human rights and civil rights. If you are fine with it being taken from somebody else, if you are fine with a bunch of jurors not being the same race as the person being on trial, if you are fine with the police being able to just to point at somebody and put them into a camp where they have no due process, if you are fine with no one asking, who raped all these young girls, 11-year-old girls, 12-year-old girls, 15-year-old girls who were not pregnant when they were taken into ICE and are now all here in the state of Texas, where they put all the pregnant ones so that they cannot get an abortion. But they don't give them all the necessities because they're giving them such little food that they can't produce milk. If you're fine with the cruelty of all this, then keep in mind you are just one mistake away from angering a cop that now has the right to just pluck you from your life and put you over there so that you can also deal with not having due process, not having a voice, not having food and access to medical supplies and care. I don't know at what point people have to realize that we are not able to survive this and maintain our democracy unless we are recognizing it's codependent with each other. And the level of hate that I'm seeing all over this thing, I've been seeing horrendous things. I've seen people say that all black people are thieves. I've seen, people from India say that all white people, are the drudge of society. I mean, I'm like, what the hell, people? If you've known one person who's a different race, a different religion, a different culture, a different sexual orientation than you, that has made your day better. Did you get your hair done by someone who is gay and you felt fabulous later? Did you get your car repaired by somebody? Did you get your meal made by somebody who made the best hamburger for your life? Or maybe you were at a 4-star Michelin place in Dallas, and they, some cook in the back did that because they were the sous chef. I don't care what tax bracket you're at. You have had your life made better because of somebody of a totally different demographic than you, of a totally different sexual orientation than you, of a totally different religion than you, of a totally different culture than you. And that is why America is great, because we all collaborate and work to contribute the best we have to each other. And unless we want to be able to progress into the future with hope and prosperity and a real chance, if we don't want to do that, then yeah, let's start hating each other. Because again, divide and conquer is always said for those two reasons, because when you divide people, they're easier to conquer. And right now, the group that's trying to conquer our democracy and tear down our civil rights and our human rights is coming out of the White House. It is. And if you are not a white, straight, their preferred type of Christianity, male, you are not on that list of preferred demographics. And even if you thought you were, look at the Mormons, look at the Catholics, you may not be for long. So recognize the value in each other. The person across from you, walking down the street, the person who's totally different than you, they are your collaborator. Do I look different than you? Do I believe differently than you? Do I act differently than you? Have I helped you? How do you and I see things totally different a good deal of the time, but I still helped you? You still called me up and said, Marianne, can you help me pay my rent? Marianne, I have a friend that's in jail. Can you get them out? Marianne, can you contribute to this, this drive I'm doing at my church or my synagogue or my mosque? Can you help to this? And if I have given any value to any of you, and this, God, I'm now 49, and in the over 20 years I've been a humanitarian in Dallas, then chances are there are a whole lot of people out there that have been contributing to making your life good too. Show up for each other. Speak up for each other. And if you hear someone make a generalized statement, speak up. That is how you save our democracy. That is how you save the warmth of the South. There are a lot of things wrong in the South, I admit it. But one thing we don't have wrong is our warm nature. We've always had a beautiful, warm nature. I've always said, if we could have the progressive attitude of the North, but the warmth of the South, we have it made. But we're losing it if we have neighbor against neighbor on the basis of a generalization. Don't let them do that to us. I always say Texans, we suffer from Alamo syndrome because we don't know when to give up. And I've had a whole lot of people from Asia and Africa and Europe ask me, aren't you, ready to just give up? Part of me is scared. Part of me is terrified. And yeah, I'm taking the right steps to make sure that I have a place to go should something happen. But by golly, I will not shut up. I will show up and I will support. And I'll do it intelligently. But the one thing that all of us can do is to not be silent. The one thing all of us can do is to not allow somebody to generalize another demographic. We have to stand up. Hey, I know someone like that, and they're good with me. I like them. They made my life better in this way. Maybe you don't know them, but they made that difference. I invite you to be part of the solution. I invite you to help us defend our democracy. I invite you to help defend our civil rights. I invite you to help defend our human rights, because it begins with appreciation and empathy for each other, no matter how different we are. So that's my request for you all. I wish that we could get back together and collaborate intentionally. But I know that there's so much pain. And what I'm asking you, and I know it's a big ask, is don't allow those who are self-serving to use your own bigotry. We all have a certain amount of bigotry because we've had pain. We've had repeated instances when a demographic has hurt us. I'm not ignorant to that. I've experienced that. But we also know many of those demographics who've actually showed up. And maybe it was something small, but they did. And if anybody from a different demographic who looked different than you, was a different race than you, different religion than you, a different culture than you, a different, sexual orientation than you, a different gender than you, made your life better in any way, then speak up. And know that when you do, you are helping to protect the empathy that is necessary to bind democracy together. We lose our empathy. And empathy doesn't mean agreement. It means our capacity to step outside ourselves and see out of each other's eyes. We lose our capacity to do that. We will lose the glue that binds our democracy, because we have to have our empathy. Without our empathy, we can't vote intelligently. Every time you vote on something that doesn't deal with your particular demographic, that's an act of empathy or lack of. Now, we may not know each other's demographics, but by golly, we depend on them. I had an experience a number of years ago, and I've never talked about this publicly before. I'm going to here, and I'll tick off who I tick off. So if any of you want some gossip, you can listen to this. When I was in my early 20s, I served on, I was asked to serve on the Friends of Fair Park. And I was like, oh wow, one of the first, boards I've ever been asked to be on. I'm so excited. And I show up, and I'm walking into this room, and someone's already talking, so I'm just trying to be real quiet, and I sneak over and sit down, but first empty chairs so I don't make a ruckus. Now, everyone in the room's going, so I guess I must have sat next to somebody no one else was going to sit next to, because I didn't know better. So I sat next to this person, and he was going on and on about the increase of DART. And back then, DART buses were really polluting. I mean, I was one of those asthmatics that you would go by and struggling to breathe. My dad was one of the advocates for making sure we had extra ERs for people with asthma. Dallas used to be horrible back then. It was really bad. And, they would go by, you had it was like Pigpen, a big, blurry, black smoke. And I knew, because Dad had been trying to do City Place, that development. A lot of people don't realize it was supposed to go from what's now the West Village all the way out to Fair Park. It was supposed to have a trolley that connected everything, and there were a lot of natural springs that were supposed to be released, and it was supposed to be this wonderful, diverse economic demographic, development. And, I knew, because of all the data he collected, that they had actually analyzed the limitation to, as the buses were back then, how many buses could go through these neighborhoods without causing this huge upstick in asthma and other kind of issues that people would get, from having exposure to X amount of pollution. And so I'm hearing this man talk about wanting to increase and do everything they could to destroy the advance of the trolley out to Fair Park like it was originally supposed to do. That's why that broad, next to City Place, you see how wide the road is? That's why originally the trolley was going to go down there. Obviously it didn't happen. But anyway, yeah, and it didn't happen because there was a financial desire. People at DART wanted DART to be the main thing. So, I'm up there and I'm saying, I'm listening to this. I say, you can't increase the number of buses. The people out there will, there are too many people that'll be negatively affected. You have to have the trolley. You can't increase the pollution. And this person actually said to me, you can't, don't worry about that. It's not going to affect you. You're over in Highland Park. It's just going to affect that poor area. They actually said that to me. And I was like 22, whatever. I hadn't learned decorum. And so my sarcastic nature was much more like Daria back then. And I said, well, you obviously didn't do very well in science back in high school, because if you did, you'd understand there's this little scientific thing called wind, and you're so sociopathic that you only care about what happens in your backyard. It'll blow it in your backyard too, so it can also be your problem. I got a notice the next 48 hours saying my service was no longer required on that board. Fast forward a number of years later, I'm serving as the MC for a big Earth Day festival that used to be out in the White Rock Lake area. And I'm up there, and Mayor Laura Miller is sitting next to me. And my job was to present the various awards throughout the day. And she said, I do not envy you. I said, well, I said, you're going to have to present this award to the CEO of DART. And he was supposed to change 36 buses over to being less polluting. So, it's like, okay. And she said, he's only done 6. And so I look over and I recognize there's that man who had told me, he didn't care about the pollution going over SARS. So I look over and I said, okay. And I look down the audience and I see there's a camera. Like, is that live? She said, yeah, it's live. So I said, okay. So I go up there, I grab this big trophy, and I'm sitting next to him. I said, hey, I'm so proud to give you the trophy, acknowledging that you have changed the first 6 of the 36 buses you have pledged to make better for the environment. The looks could kill. Within about a month, DART announced it was doing all this push to try and become more eco-conscious, and I made a lifelong enemy, and I can live with that. But the reason why I share that with you is because that's what's happening these days. Just like the pollution, people are thinking, oh, it's only affecting them, it's not going to affect me. The winds of change, of economics, of politics, all those various things. We live in a world of economic systems, ecological systems, and sociological systems. And all those winds will blow what is happening in somebody else's backyard to affect yours. Do not get tricked in believing that you can live in a silo unaffected by the rest of our community. Do not get tricked by being told that all your woes are because of some other demographic. Do not get tricked, because when someone says it's all their fault, what they're actually saying is, I have no idea how to fix this, but so that I can get votes, I need you to hate that, because it's easier for me to galvanize support out of hate, because then I don't have to actually offer a solution. That's what they're saying. Don't let them get out with that. Hold them accountable by saying, I am choosing to recognize other people's common humanity. I'm choosing by the individual person. I'm not generalizing my demographic. They're a human being. They're a citizen. They are a collaborator with me in protecting our democracy. And even if we have totally different value systems, totally different religious beliefs, totally different cultures, totally different economic brackets, my freedom relies on the perpetuity and security of their freedom. Because believe me, if we let them divide us and let them create that and sustain the illusion that we are completely independent of each other's rights, we will all lose our rights. Today, I'm married to Joshua Raymond Frank because he had an ancestor that knew to get out of Germany in time. The parts of the family that didn't get out in time, you've heard about. Anne Frank's family. I don't want to see that happen in the United States, and we are at a huge risk of that happening. But only if we allow them to divide us against each other. And that's why I ask you, if you want to generalize about a demographic, take a look at me. I'm a mutt made out of a million different DNA strands around the world. North African, West African, Siberian, Southeastern Asian, Native American, Iberian, and apparently 15% that's alien. And unidentifiable. I help people not because they look like me, or they believe like me, or share a culture like me. For me, heritage came from my white family's set of values. And it came from all those generations who operated the Underground Railroad in Mexico, who fought against the Ku Klux Klan, and later who fought to make DEI something that was a reality within 7-Eleven. That was my heritage, fighting for human rights and civil rights. To do less than that is to spit in my father's face, my grandfather's face, my grandmother's face, and my great-grandfather's face. Look at who you're connected to by your values. Today I talk about my spirit family because they are also fighting for human rights and civil rights. And if you look at who I hang out with, hardly any of us look like each other. It's because we recognize that we are the human family. In America, we have to remember that or we will lose everything. Because believe me, that's exactly what's at risk here. And if you don't want to be living in a feudal system where only the uber wealthy maintain freedom and everybody else is at risk for being picked up and thrown into a slave labor system that has literally been voted on and made legal over in Louisiana, and has literally been something that the police have now been given the right to just grab somebody in Texas. If we don't want to go down that route, we better start advocating for each other and not letting them divide us. Because the minute we start allowing them to divide us by playing along and generalizing demographics and promoting hate, well, we're 50% there to losing the freedoms that we had, that so many other people sacrificed for us. So, all my love to everybody. That is my soapbox for today. Thanks to those of you who have been watching. I know there's not many people who have made a comment, but I can see the numbers, and I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love you all.